So this is the closing panel of the day, and there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, because the tone and the conclusions that we will end up with may make you go home with this uplifting sense of optimism, AI is going to solve every problem of the world, or be so terrified that you'll go home straight to hug your kids and not talk about technology for a month. I don't know where it's going to go, because we could go either way. We have both perspectives in the panel. What I can promise is that there's going to be some tension, some entertainment as a result of that, and hopefully we'll have some new original thinking around this topic that you haven't heard before. The motivation for this panel is that AI is on the dating site, basically, metaphorically, and it's trying to find the best use case scenarios right now, the best locations, the best maybe applications that will leverage the use of AI to solve problems that are really ideal for artificial intelligence. The question is, do we choose different parts of the world where we have different institutions, and where traditionally and historically we have had this division of the world between labor-intensive and capital-intensive clusters? Now, AI may change all of that, and we will want to talk to this panel on how that may happen and what are some of the interventions we may want to apply at this point to have some agency on that directionality. So I think this is the panel probably with the most number of miles traveled to come here. We have Roeland, who came from Amsterdam, Juan from Buenos Aires. I presume Mark, you came from Boston. I came from San Francisco. So we have a hugely diverse panel from different geographies. And what I'm going to ask you all is to spare perhaps 10 seconds to give a little introduction on yourselves.
So I'm Roeland, co-founder and CEO of Plumerai. That is not me. That's the wrong photo. We're headquartered in London, and where everyone over the last few years only been talking about larger and larger LLMs running in slow, expensive, energy-hogging data centers. Plumerai's Tiny AI does it all locally on the device itself. So Plumerai's Tiny AI is faster, cheaper, runs on battery-powered devices. It's private and runs on cheap off-the-shelf chips.
Thank you so much. And let me mention Tony Fadell, who is the creator of the iPhone and also the co-founder of Nest, picks every year a few startups that he supports and funds, and you're one of them. So you'll tell us the story on how that happened, but I think this speaks to the potential of your product in the global markets. Juan?
So my name is Juan Santiago. I'm from Argentina, and what we do at the company is called Santex Group, and what we do is we integrate different technologies. We basically design custom tech solutions for specific problems in the company. And I also have investment funds that we invest in early stage and startups, also technology-based. And our company is 18 countries, but most of the base is in Global South, is in the Latin American market.
And Mark?
I'm Mark Gorenberg. I've been in venture capital now for a little over 30 years. 11 years ago, started a firm called Zetta Venture Partners, named after Zettabyte, to be the first firm to invest solely in AI, B2B, and seed stage investments. And then I've been on the MIT Corporation now for a little over 20 years, and last year became the chair of the corporation as well.
So we have the perspectives of somebody who's building products and a startup in the world of AI. We have an integrator who also represents the perspective of large family businesses. Juan is a member of an ice cream manufacturer in Argentina, which is number 5 or 6 in the world, 100 million kilos of ice cream every year that they produce. So these pain points of traditional industries around the globe is very much represented by Juan. And with Mark, we have the perspective of technology from MIT, the source of many of these innovation, as well as the perspective of venture capitalists who are seeing a ton of deal flow. Let's start from the beginning, Mark, on a bit of the history of how we got here in terms of AI. And if you can mention some ways in which you see the potential for democratization of AI in the deal flow that you see, or some of the technologies that you have seen come out of MIT.
Okay. So Rebecca, let me start by saying that there's this perception that AI started at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, but actually the technologies building that we see today over about 6 decades In fact, CSAIL at MIT now is 61 years old. And in terms of incorporation in companies, AI has been incorporated now for about 15 years in companies, and about 72% of companies are using AI today and getting great ROI, on average about 3 to 5 times ROI for the applications that they're implementing. And so in that regard, Zetta started, and we were investing in applications that were transforming manufacturing in terms of frontline systems, inventory balancing, in terms of production line prediction before things could go down. We've been investing in insurance, augmenting what insurance assessors do to save time, get greater accuracy, retail and e-commerce, investing in personalization and marketing, and investing a lot in healthcare, dentistry, sleep apnea, radiation dosage. Now, since 2020, we started investing in Gen AI, and this is the year when companies have exploded in experimentation. So I think 65% of companies this year started budgeting and have been starting to implement Gen AI, not putting their core in yet, but in marketing, customer support, software development. They've been using these tools. Now, in terms of what we're investing in at Zetta for Gen AI, we've been investing a lot in AI native science, particularly starting with life science. We think that this is going to be the decade of explosion. So we've invested in 4 companies that are designing drugs rather than discovering drugs. Things like protein language models, where instead of the next in the sequence being a text word, it's actually a protein in a potential molecule which could create a potential drug. We've been investing in next generation workflow, where basically you can use things like digital twins or totally recreate the workflow from what it's been before use of unstructured data and generative AI. We've been investing in new professional service companies that are Gen AI based. So, for example, auditing firms today, which are totally manual, now would be a combination of software with auditors, or language translation instead of language translation houses would be basically software plus language translators. Even in psychiatry, I've invested in there. And then lastly, in terms of applications in Gen AI, we've been investing a lot in agents, which I think is going to be the huge area of going beyond copilots to autonomous copilots, basically, but working on applications like DevOps or going around the data center, and not so much just general. So that's in terms of applications. Now, if you want, I can talk a little bit about MIT, or we can move to others on the panel.
Let's start the discussion on what does it mean to create equal access to artificial intelligence, this concept of democratizing access. You're sitting as the chair of the board of trustees at MIT, and MIT has a long tradition of believing in creating equal access to all, to technology. What are some signs that you see that may happen? You mentioned some Nobel Prizes, as well as the way we look at labor. Is there anything you would like to share that you're seeing happening at MIT?
Well, first of all, it's been an absolute explosion of Gen AI, with the idea of people learning machine learning as well as their discipline, and taking that back, not only here in the United States, but taking that back to where they've come to MIT, particularly for undergraduate or graduate school. We have the Schwarzman College now, which was $1 billion endeavor, and that in that concept has diffused machine learning to all 30 disciplines and schools around MIT. My last count, I counted 25 different centers joint between departments, and about 35 different robotics labs that have been developed. And I have a spreadsheet actually on my computer now of 650 different projects that are going on between either research or research that's turning into commercialization. But to your question, in terms of access, there's been a lot in terms of transit work going on. Entrepreneurship, there's a project called Jetpack, which now people are using, which creates your business plan for you in a very detailed way if you just have a product that people are taking back. And perhaps more interestingly, to what you're saying, We have two economics professors that just won the Nobel Prize, Darren Archinglow and Simon Johnson, and their work working with David Otter and others called Shaping the Future of Work actually looked at this idea of not being fearful in terms of labor with AI, but instead of being very optimistic as long as governments, beyond engineers and entrepreneurs, governments start to get involved in policy and also in terms of investment. And with that, they came out with a very clear thesis on the future of work that lays this out, that why actually we could be net job productive rather than the other way around. So I would not give it, the right benefit to talk about it as much as people reading it. But I think that's also something that's not U.S. only. So I think every country in the world could follow the lead of what they've been talking about in order to progress jobs in this AI economy.
So if I read between the lines, what you're conveying is that there is a way with the right institutions and context for AI to help speed up upskilling to those who are using AI to get to a level of proficiency on a certain competency. Or it could also, with the right setup, be used to create more jobs that will render the net effect to be neutral or positive. So this scenario of we're going to have millions or hundreds of millions of people lose their jobs may not be necessarily true.
I agree.
Am I reading correctly?
I agree with that.
And on that topic of democratization, we know that a lot of companies are creating tech that is specifically targeting some of those opportunities globally. And so tell us about how Tiny AI as a space and Plumerai, your company, are trying to capitalize on that opportunity.
Yeah. So Plumerai's Tiny AI does all locally on the device instead of running in a slow, energy-hogging data centers. And so Plumerai's Tiny AI is now running on millions of devices in the field. We've started with smart home cameras, but now rapidly expanding to video conferencing cameras, to retail, enterprise security, elderly care, many other sectors. And so on the democratizing AI aspect, what we've been seeing is we're seeing many companies out there who've been building great products at amazing price points. And these companies now want to add a lot of AI features to their products. But a lot of companies outside of big tech, they just don't have the same large internal AI resources that Google has, that Amazon and Apple have. But it's still, they can build great products at amazing price points, and they still need to add these AI features to their products to keep up. So what we're seeing is that we're democratizing AI by helping these companies outside of big tech to add great AI features to their products. And that's partly true in the US, but we also see many companies outside of the US, from Turkey to Brazil to India, Vietnam, Germany. We're building great products and with many diverse applications for their local markets, and we're helping them add highly accurate AI to their products. And on the other hand, also to democratize AI is just making very affordable devices, because especially outside of the US, these products just have to be available at a lower price point, and definitely not rely on very expensive cloud services. So that's also where Plumerai's Tiny AI is helping.
So you make them cheaper, and I also know that you are focusing on energy expenditure as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you do that affordability increase, as well as making sure that the devices are consuming less energy to be more compatible with global markets?
Yeah, so the energy aspect, so what you see is that everyone's been running larger and larger models in the cloud, and especially outside of the US, it's just going to get very expensive if we need, and I think we are going to be building many more data centers with more power plants. So basically, I see these tiny AI models as the first line of defense on the edge, analyzing the data stream continuously in a very energy efficient way, and then just activating the much larger models in the cloud selectively. And that drastically reduces the prices, the energy consumption and the price of these cloud-based models.
One thing that fascinates me is that I've been in Silicon Valley for now 20 plus years, and I've lived through a few of these innovation waves with new trends in technology coming up out of Silicon Valley and then being adopted elsewhere, maybe with a delay, let's say 6 months or 12 months later. Now with AI, I was looking at some charts showing the penetration of ChatGPT globally. And India's number 1, and Argentina is number 4, actually, in terms of penetration. And this is happening in some cases sooner, the adoption, right, that in Silicon Valley or the US. So Juan, just wearing your hat of somebody who spent a lot of time talking to businesses in Latin America and generally the global South, why do you think that is happening? What do you think are some of the advantages that are today for that adoption for those businesses? But also, what are some of the threats that you'll be concerned about in terms of countries that are very much focusing on basing their economies in this labor-intensive model, right? Affordable labor, and therefore there's investments and manufacturing in those countries. How is this going to change that dynamic?
Well, I think AI, the conversation about AI, I don't personally think is about technology per se. I think the conversation about AI has to do more with ethics and more of what is going to be the real impact around AI and what we're building with AI. So we talk about a lot of, democratizing equality, etc., etc. But I think that AI is going to be based on the opportunities or based on the challenges, depending on what's the intent in which it's built. And this is a conversation that most of us don't really want to have. We want to focus only on the advantages of developing technology to accelerate the current transactional model that we have today in the world, which clearly serves very few people in the world and leaves out a huge amount of people. Okay, so I guess the one question here is that do we need to rethink what progress means? Is that a question we need to ask ourselves? Really, it's a difficult question, right? It's a difficult conversation to have. So to your question, why do I think that Argentina ranks number 4 in adoption of ChatGPT? Is because I think that people are trying to focus more on the opportunity to catch up, because clearly AI is facilitating all these tools that helps for those who are falling behind in the current transactional model to do catch up. So ChatGPT is giving that opportunity, and AI in general. So there's a lot of hunger for the use of all these new technologies for underdeveloped countries. And where do I see the threats or the challenges for the region is in the tremendous gap that exists between technology and those people who can actually, in reality, capture the opportunities that we talk in this conference today, for example. It's very, very different. Today, I was in many panels listening, and we talk about CPUs, GPUs, and PPUs, all the ones that you want. Just put them out there, and we can talk a lot about it. But the reality is that there are different realities in the world. And I understand that many of the reasoning and many of the conclusions that we can take out of the exact same technology advances in the United States, it might differ quite a bit from other geographies. And that has to do with the different realities. And so today in our minds, globally, we think that progress means, more profits, more GDP, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that we need to rethink that meaning. And I think that we need to think progress as a more inclusive kind of concept, taking into account social impact and environmental impact.
So if I could jump on that for a second, as Juan just answered something that I've been struggling to understand. So thank you for that. But it's because there have been a lot of surveys done in the last year that show optimism in countries of AI is extremely different. And so ironically, Indonesia, Mexico, India, China, and frankly, Brazil, Argentina, most of South America believes that AI, to like 60 to 80%, believes that the benefits of AI are much more than the risks. And therefore, I think gives us psychology to use these tools and be very optimistic. The United States, that number is closer to 30 to 35%. And in Western Europe, it's even lower, which is leading to a cycle of regulation rather than looking at it from the benefits. And so I think that this sense of the psychology of the people in these countries is a huge difference. And so you actually laid that out more in what's happening, which I appreciate.
That's a very interesting point. I'm an immigrant. I was born in Korea, raised in Argentina. I ended up marrying a Viking person. And this concept of change, I grew up thinking change is great because my surroundings and the environment, the crisis that my country is in, I want something to change. And so it was very positive. Whereas, if you go to any Scandinavian countries, change is usually considered bad, right? It's not something desirable. And so right now, the paradigm is such that if we don't like a certain task or job, or it's something that can be done in a tedious, automatic way, we outsource it to Argentina, for example, right? So I'm reading this book called Bullshit Jobs, pardon my French, but it talks about exactly a division of the world into some people do the jobs we don't want and some people do the jobs that we want. And the economies of these countries and the global dynamics that we have between nations in terms of competitiveness is based on where you have knowledge economies versus labor economies. Can AI change that? Can now Argentina, with the adoption of ChatGPT, be ahead of the game and produce more AI aided or augmented products that will be higher value? Is this?
I mean, it certainly could. And Mark, to your point, I think that the reason why it's higher is because there is a lot of talking about the opportunity side of the AI implementation and not so much about the threat or the challenges that can, present. Let's don't forget that, nobody wants to talk about the hot, topic, the elephant in the room, which is, policy, or are we going to regulate, right, AI? And if so, how are we going to regulate it? Why are we going to regulate it? And so in a lot of countries where regulation is close to zero, right, there is more enthusiasm, if you will, for the end user because they think that they can do pretty much anything that they want with it, right? And they're going to be able to get away with it, and that they see that as an opportunity. So it's all of that falls into the positive, side of the narrative. So where in other places where, like in the United States, for example, where things started to get, a little bit more controlled, people see the threat of it, right? So more AI innovation in developed countries, less trust from people, right? And so, I think that's the reason why Latin America is. But if you think about the real challenges the region has, a factory to implement AI that has 2,500 workers is a threat. They don't want to implement AI because they will immediately ask themselves, what am I going to do with 2,500 workers, right? And that's a problem for the mayor, and that's a problem for the governor, and that's the problem for the president of the country eventually, if that were to happen. And a lot is being talked about reskilling, but reskilling is not as easy as we think it is. Reskilling is a process that begins right from the baseline of the educational, foundation, model of a country, and it takes time, and the gap again is huge. So in the United States, we're really used to be in touch with technology from day one. In a place like Bolivia or Peru or Uruguay, Paraguay, it's not the case.
But there's a difference between past technological adoption and AI in particular, because AI, as you practice, like my 7-year-old says, practice doesn't make you perfect, it makes you improve. So that's the way I approach AI adoption, let's say in the global south, because there is more adoption right now, there's more practice. In the US, maybe investing in innovation, billions of dollars into creating new technology, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of short-term revenue opportunities in the adoption component, and that may create the possibility of faster improvement and training of those models. How do you think of your revenue opportunities globally versus Europe or Northern America?
So most of our customers are based in the US, just a large market. Also because we focus a lot on consumer electronics. But what's interesting is, for example, the privacy question. Already in the US, you have different privacy legislation per state for things like face identification. But then the privacy conversation in Europe is at a very different level. So we have major European companies coming to us that have camera products, and they want to make those camera products smarter, but they can't rely on AI in the cloud because of privacy compliance issues, but also because a lot of consumers in Europe care a lot more about the whole privacy issue than in the US. So a lot of these European companies want to provide camera devices with end-to-end encryption of the video feed, so that no one else, so that's impossible for anyone else except for you to look at, for example, video of events that are stored in the cloud. But then since you're using end-to-end encryption, it's just fundamentally impossible to do any AI on that in the cloud. So that means that you have to run AI locally on the device. So it's very interesting to see, for example, with privacy, how different products need to be designed for different regions.
I have some questions from the audience. We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to include a couple of them. So, Mark, you talked about MIT's efforts into training some of this new generation into being prepared for this new era. And so one of the questions refers to how to do that preparation for engineers. How do you see education changing since LLMs are becoming part of the work? And, that students are not using, or workers are not using AI to cheat, but that this is an improvement over their training and their skill sets.
Yeah, well, as I said, I think students, the most popular class in MIT's history is Introduction to Machine Learning. And so that's a starting point that everybody wants to get into this AI wave, and computer science as a part of the ECS has just exploded the last couple of years as well. So I think naturally students are seeing this as a natural area that they need to be working on. MIT is a really interesting place in that technology, how should I say this, research beyond existing large language models is at the forefront. The biggest issue I think we have to get over right now is that almost all large language models are based on transformer technology, and transformer technology is extremely compute intensive, and it's also extremely energy intensive. And I know Roeland talked a little bit about what they're doing in that regard. MIT is working on multiple fronts. So one is liquid neural nets is a technology that's moved forward that takes about 1/10 of this amount of time and compute for training, and about 1/1000th For inference, it's based on a totally different technology beyond transformers. They did a 3-hour introduction of that earlier this week. And I think that that's going to be a huge game changer. We have people that are working on using light instead of electrons as computer systems to do this, which is also making large language models run a lot faster with a lot less energy. And also, use of unlocking photonic concepts around computing. So there's a lot of different areas in that, as well as all the quantum work that's going on for next generation. So there's a lot of work at MIT to be able to go beyond the wall that we're probably going to see for existing large language models.
Fantastic. Can I ask you a very quick question, Juan? We have only 1 minute left, so please, 10-second answer if you can. And you'll laugh at me because the question is really loaded. How do you create an ecosystem that is inclusive? When you talk about including everybody in Latin America and the Global South, how do you do that?
The first thing that I think we need to do is pause. I'm very unpopular here. I hope they invite me again, sometime to talk about AI. So, contrary to what everybody has been saying in the conference today, that we need to accelerate, that we need to go fast, that we need to do, all these things. My approach to it is that we need to pause. We need to pause. We need to think. We need to think again. Let's remember one thing. AI doesn't have Control Z, right? So this isn't an email that we're writing and all of a sudden we say like, oh, I think we fuck it up. So we need to go back and then, let's delete everything. Let's rewrite it and it's going to be fine. No, it isn't going to be fine because the way we're training this, it is the way that it's going to stick around and it's going to stick around for a really long time, right? So there is no undoing in this. So pausing and taking the necessary time to understand the real impact of what it is we're building, I think is key for them to create a more inclusive, ecosystem, and that's the number one, I would say. And the other one is we need to talk with people that we don't want to talk. We need to talk with people that think differently. We need to be more inclusive in our conversations, right? So if we are more inclusive in our conversations, we want to get to more inclusive outcomes. And I think that is extremely, extremely important that we do. So AI as engineering and as, a hard fact as it might sound from the engineering point of view, I think that it has a lot to do with power skills, with soft skills, with human skills. And so we need to learn how to do things from the human element aspect first, to then build systems that we will not regret having built in the future.
So on that note, let's wrap up the panel with the sense of agency by humans. I'm going to ask you a fun question. If you were to just replace something that you have in your schedule today, so think of Monday to Friday, there must be something in that on the calendar that you don't want to do. What would that task be that you would gladly outsource to AI, that you choose to outsource, not AI takes over or replaces, but you have the agency to say, I don't want to do this? What would that be?
So as a founder, there are many tasks I'm very passionate about. But what I don't like is the legal aspects. Our lawyers tend to write very overly complex emails. Every iteration I know is very expensive. I think AI can do a better job. And also
Okay, replace lawyers.
Affordable.
Juan?
For me, it would be brushing my teeth. Yeah, I just hate to brush my teeth. Every time I eat, I have to go brush my teeth.
Nobody's going to want to kiss you tonight.
Some AI thing could do that for me. That would be awesome.
How about you, Mark?
Well, I can't top these, but I remember the Jetsons, so it can do everything for me, right? I can go on the conveyor belt and get ready for work in the morning. So there you go. That's what I would like it to do.
When asked this question, the most popular answer is actually replace politicians. Now that elections are coming, let's think about that. Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you for staying and for coming to come.